Every morning she poured his coffee with a smile, never knowing the man sitting at table 6 would change her life forever. Jasmine Moore wasn't trying to make headlines. At 29, she was a waitress at Cafe Aurora, a cozy little diner on the corner of Maple and 5th, where regulars came for black coffee, burnt toast, and conversation. She came in early, stayed late, and never complained. Her life was small, but her heart was big. She was raising her son Elijah on her own. Rent was always late, sleep was never enough, but she kept going, because that's what she knew. Life hadn't given her much, but it hadn't taken her joy either. She still believed in people. And then there was him, Harold Langston. He sat in the same corner booth every morning at 7:45 sharp. A man of ritual, black suit, dark eyes, silver hair, and a silence so thick it made the air feel heavy. Most staff whispered about him, said he was strange, maybe senile, maybe loaded. But Jasmine never cared for rumors. She greeted him like she did everyone else, warm, present, human. He rarely spoke more than a nod or a "thank you." She never pressed. But when his hands trembled, she helped him cut his pancakes. When his coat slipped from his shoulders, she gently lifted it back. She was kind, not to impress, but because it was right. Then one morning he stopped coming. No explanation, no call, just gone. 7 days later, everything changed. 3 black SUVs pulled into the diner lot. 4 bodyguards stepped out, followed by 2 sharply dressed lawyers. The entire restaurant froze. Then one of them spoke. "Is there a Jasmine Moore here?" Heads turned. Forks paused mid-air. Jasmine stood, her hands still damp from washing dishes. "Yes," she said, heart pounding. And that was the moment her world flipped. What could a humble waitress have done to summon lawyers and men with guns? Who was Harold Langston really? And why had he left something behind that would unravel not just a fortune, but a family legacy? This isn't just about money. It's about truth, legacy, and how kindness can shatter even the deepest silence. Before the lawyers, before the headlines, it was just another ordinary day. Jasmine Moore's mornings started while most of the city still slept. The shrill buzz of her alarm cut through the silence at 4:30 a.m. She didn't hit snooze. There was no time for that. She had exactly 18 minutes to shower, dress, and pack her son Elijah's school lunch, usually a peanut butter sandwich, a juice box, and a sticky note with a doodle and words like, "Be brave," or "Mama loves you big." She kissed his cheek while he slept, whispered a prayer under her breath, and tiptoed out into the cool, hushed streets of suburban Atlanta. By 5:15 a.m., Jasmine was inside Cafe Aurora, the kind of place where the clock seemed stuck in the 1980s, and the tile floor was always just a little too sticky. The smell of burnt bacon, cleaning bleach, and coffee beans fused into something oddly comforting. She greeted the cook with a nod, tied her apron tight, and got to work. There was no warm-up. Just go. Jasmine knew the rhythm by heart. Refill the sugar jars, slice lemons, wipe menus that no one ever read. She moved with quiet efficiency, her tired body fueled by muscle memory and coffee. Her coworkers liked her mostly, but she kept to herself, smiled when it felt right, stayed out of drama, and avoided break-room gossip. Not because she was shy, because she was focused. Focused on survival. Focused on Elijah. And then, like clockwork, at precisely 7:45 a.m., Harold Langston would walk in, tall, deliberate, wearing the same black coat and scuffed leather shoes, his face set in an expression so still it almost looked carved. He walked slowly, not because he was frail, but because he was calculating. Every step was purposeful. He never greeted anyone, never smiled, never made small talk, except with Jasmine. She'd already have his booth ready, back corner, against the window. Newspaper folded just the way he liked. Coffee, black, no sugar, already waiting, steam curling into the air like a secret. "Morning, Mr. Langston," she'd say quietly. He would nod. "Thank you," 2 words, same tone, Every day. At first, other waitresses joked about it. "What is he, your ghost boyfriend?" One snickered. Another muttered, "Probably some creepy rich loner with nothing better to do." But Jasmine ignored them. She didn't care about his money or his past. She just saw a man who seemed tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that's etched into your bones after life has taken too much. She watched the way he read the newspaper, not scanning, but studying. How he sometimes folded and unfolded it without reading at all. How he stared out the window for minutes at a time, unmoving, like waiting for something, or someone. He was alone, always. No phone calls, no visitors, no change in order. Same toast, same eggs, diagonally sliced, no butter. But Jasmine saw the subtle things, the way he smoothed the napkin across his lap with precision, how he lifted the coffee cup with both hands, though only one seemed to struggle, how his jaw tensed when someone laughed too loud nearby, and she never pushed. She never asked where he worked or what he used to do. She didn't need to know. She just brought warmth to his table, not just through the food, but through presence. Quiet, respectful, undemanding. Sometimes, she'd linger a second longer after refilling his mug, waiting to see if he'd speak. Most days, he didn't. But once she said, "It's cold out today, huh?" And he replied, "Colder than it should be." Another time, when she helped him steady his fork, he muttered, "These hands used to build skyscrapers." She didn't ask what he meant. She just nodded. "I believe it." That was the thing about Jasmine. She didn't pry. She didn't try to fix or change. She made space for people to be who they were, broken pieces and all. Harold noticed that. What no one at the diner knew, what not even Jasmine suspected, was that Harold Langston wasn't just a tired old man. He was Harold Langston, founder and former CEO of Langston Foods, a multi-million-dollar restaurant empire with locations in 14 states. He had built his life with fire in his chest, climbing from steelworker to mogul. But success had come with a cost. Estranged children, corporate betrayal, and a bitter solitude he wore like a second skin. He came to Cafe Aurora not for the food, but for Jasmine. At first she reminded him of his late wife, then of who he used to be before the money clouded everything. And eventually, she reminded him of hope. Each day, Jasmine unknowingly passed every unspoken test he laid before her. When he dropped his spoon, she picked it up without flinching. When he forgot his wallet once, she waved it off like it was nothing. When others ignored him, she acknowledged him with humanity. And still, she never asked for anything in return. One day he tried to hand her a $100 bill as a tip. She gently pushed it back. "That's too much, Mr. Langston." "You've earned it," he said, voice rough. She smiled. "Then keep coming back." That's payment enough. That night, he wrote a new clause into his will. Jasmine Moore didn't grow up dreaming of waiting tables. But life has a way of rerouting dreams through alleys of necessity. She was born in Birmingham, Alabama, in a part of town where school buses wheezed like they were dying and playgrounds had more broken swings than working ones. Her mother, Denise, was everything. Nurse's aide by day, janitor by night, and mother always. She braided Jasmine's hair every Sunday evening, no matter how tired she was. They didn't have much, but they had love. Strong, stubborn, loud love. Denise raised Jasmine on 3 unbreakable rules. Work hard. Stay kind. Never let anyone make you feel small. Jasmine clung to those words like armor. They shaped her, quiet but sharp, kind but not soft. In school, she was the girl who never forgot a homework assignment, who corrected the teacher gently when they made a mistake. She was invisible to the cool kids but unforgettable to her teachers. In junior year, she wrote an essay on surviving grief before she'd ever tasted it. She won first place and held that certificate like a passport to another life. Her goal was clear: escape the cycle. Go to college. Help others. Become a social worker. She had the grades, the drive, and a full scholarship to the University of Alabama. But then life knocked. It started with a cough that didn't go away, then doctor visits, tests, and finally, The word that changed everything. Cancer. Lung cancer. Stage 4. Denise's world shrank to oxygen tanks and hospital beds. Jasmine's world became smaller too, shrinking to graveyard shifts, waiting rooms, and late-night cries into her pillow. She dropped out after her first semester, not because she wanted to, because she had to. She worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on, sold her textbooks, and bathed her mother every night. And when the time came, when her mother's hands stopped squeezing hers, Jasmine buried her with trembling fingers and a hollow heart. The scholarship expired. The dream withered. With 276 and a suitcase filled with clothes she'd outgrow emotionally more than physically, Jasmine took a bus to Atlanta. She thought, new city, fresh start, just until I figure things out. 7 years later, she was still at Cafe Aurora. But Jasmine didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. At 29, her life was a delicate balancing act between grace and grit. She clocked in before the sun, made Elijah's lunches by instinct, and paid bills in pieces. Her apartment was 1 bedroom, with cracked tiles in the kitchen and a bathroom fan that wheezed louder than her son's bedtime stories. But it was theirs. Elijah was 5 now, bright, wild-haired, and full of questions. He asked once if they were poor. "No, baby," she'd said gently. "We're just between blessings." He smiled, believed her, and that was enough, for now. She didn't have a car, took the MARTA train, and walked 3 blocks to work every day, even when the sky spat rain and her shoes had holes in them. She memorized the bus schedules and rationed groceries like a chemist. Coupons were lifelines. Clearance racks were treasure hunts. But Jasmine held her head high. She made Elijah's birthday cakes from scratch. She sewed buttons back onto his school shirts. And every night, no matter how tired she was, she read him a book, sometimes with her eyes half closed. The world rarely saw her. To most people, she was a blur behind a name tag. A sweetheart to customers who didn't learn her name. A girl to those who didn't respect her age. A token hire to some co-workers who resented her quiet competence. She faced the daily microaggressions with a clenched jaw and a steel spine. The man who refused to tip her and asked for someone lighter. The regular who called her girl in a voice that made her skin crawl. The manager who posted the schedule without asking if she could work Sundays, knowing full well it was the only day she had Elijah all to herself. She took it all. Swallowed it down like day-old coffee, because her mama's voice always echoed in her mind. Don't let them make you small. But that didn't mean she didn't feel it. Sometimes, at night when Elijah was asleep, Jasmine would sit by the window with a cup of tea she couldn't afford and let the silence fall over her like a blanket. She would stare at the moon and whisper things she never said aloud. Is this all I get? Will it always feel this hard? Does anyone see me? She didn't want luxury. She didn't dream of mansions or diamonds. She just wanted peace, a home where the heat always worked, a life where Elijah didn't have to grow up fast like she did. Still, through the exhaustion and quiet heartbreak, Jasmine radiated something rare: dignity. She never let her circumstances define her spirit. She gave warmth to others not because they deserved it, but because she did. Because her soul needed to stay soft in a world that rewarded hardness. People at the diner began to lean on her in subtle ways. The new hire who cried in the walk-in freezer, Jasmine comforted her. The cook who lost his brother to overdose, Jasmine brought him coffee without asking. Even the gruff night manager who barked more than he spoke seemed to soften when she was near. And then there was Harold Langston. Where others saw an old man, Jasmine saw quiet sadness. Where others turned away, she leaned in, without force, without expectation. She gave him something no one else had in years: the dignity of being seen without being judged. He watched her more than she realized. The way she soothed angry customers without ever raising her voice. The way she sang under her breath when she thought no one could hear. The way she knelt to speak to children eye to eye, like their voices mattered. To Harold, Jasmine wasn't just a waitress, she was the kind of person who should be running the world. She just hadn't been given the chance, yet. For nearly 2 years, Harold Langston sat in the same booth and said barely a word. But silence isn't absence. It's armor. And even armor wears down when met with warmth. Jasmine Moore had always respected boundaries. Some customers wanted conversation. Others wanted quiet. She could read it in their posture, their tone, the way they held their coffee cups. Harold's body said, "Stay away," but his eyes said something else. Not welcoming, but watching, weighing. Then, one chilly Tuesday morning, he looked up from his folded newspaper and said the most unexpected thing. "Your son. How old is he?" Jasmine blinked. "Elijah? He's 5. Harold gave a slow nod and went back to his coffee like the question hadn't happened. But something had shifted. The next day, he asked, "You always work mornings?" She nodded. "Yeah, double shift today." Again, a nod. Again, silence. But after that, the questions came. Sporadic, hesitant, like stepping stones across a river he hadn't dared cross in years. "Did your mother raise you? What was she like? Did you ever want to leave this town?" Jasmine answered simply, without fanfare. She didn't try to impress or dramatize. She gave him honesty, the kind that sits quietly and doesn't ask for anything in return. Sometimes Harold offered pieces of himself too, small scraps, carefully measured. "I built things once," he said one morning, watching the steam rise from his cup. "Big things, buildings, brands, families." He paused. Some lasted longer than others. Jasmine didn't interrupt. She just refilled his coffee, placed a hand gently on the table beside his, and said, "That sounds like a legacy." Harold gave her a look she couldn't quite read. Part sorrow, part disbelief. Over the following weeks, Harold began arriving a little earlier, staying a little longer, folding his paper more slowly, speaking a few more words each time. He noticed things. He noticed when she had a bruise on her wrist. Bus. Doors that closed too fast, he noticed. When she forced a smile after a customer called her "girl with venom." He noticed when she came in limping, and left a heating pad with a handwritten note in her locker that evening. "For when the world gets too heavy." Jasmine never asked how he knew. She just thanked him quietly, eyes glassy, throat tight. Then one day, the conversation changed. The diner was nearly empty. Rain tapped against the windows, soft and rhythmic. Harold sat staring at his untouched toast. Jasmine approached, apron dusted with flour, arms folded. "You okay, Mr. Langston?" He looked up slowly. "You know," he said, voice thick, "I had a daughter once." Jasmine paused. It was the first time he'd ever mentioned family. "She would have been about your age now. Smart, stubborn, hated wearing shoes." "What happened to her?" Jasmine asked gently. "She stopped talking to me," he replied. "Then she stopped answering. Then she stopped existing, at least to me. It wasn't her fault." He looked down at his hands, scarred, shaking slightly. "It was mine." The air between them felt like glass, thin, delicate, about to break. "I'm sorry," Jasmine whispered. Harold's eyes met hers. "You remind me of her. Not in how you look, but in how you carry the weight. Quiet, with grace." Jasmine didn't know what to say, so she didn't. She just nodded slowly and placed her hand on his again. And from that day on, something changed. He smiled more, just slightly. He started bringing her little things, a vintage pin for her apron, a worn paperback she once mentioned loving, a crossword puzzle with her name scribbled in the margins. Once, he left a tip folded into origami, an elephant, because they remember, the note said. Another time, he watched her calm down a crying child and said softly, "The world doesn't deserve you." That afternoon, he left a $5 tip and a sticky note folded in half. It read, "Don't disappear. The world needs people like you." Jasmine tucked it behind her ID, where no one else could see. It became her private proof that someone had truly seen her. Not just the labor, not just the smile, but the soul underneath. Their bond didn't need grand gestures. It lived in the in-between moments, in shared glances, in two weary souls recognizing something sacred in each other. To everyone else, Harold was still that grumpy old man. To Jasmine, he had become something far more complex, a puzzle missing pieces, a man scarred by regret, trying in his last days to piece together something meaningful. And to Harold, Jasmine wasn't just a kind waitress. She was an anchor, a reminder that even at the end of a life built on wealth and power, what matters most is who sees you when you have nothing left to give. The quiet rhythm between Jasmine and Harold was never meant to last forever. Peace rarely goes unchallenged, and Jasmine knew better than to believe kindness made her invisible to cruelty. It happened on a Friday. The diner was buzzing, practically bursting at the seams. Plates clattered, coffee hissed from carafes, orders flew in faster than the kitchen could keep up. Jasmine had barely slept the night before. Elijah had been up coughing, and rent was 2 days overdue. Still, she came in, pressed uniform, smiled tight, but present. Harold was already seated at his usual booth, newspaper open, sipping his coffee. Jasmine had greeted him quietly with her usual, "Morning, Mr. Langston," before turning to her next task, a newly seated party of 4 businessmen at table 9. They were sharp-dressed, middle-aged, all cologne and arrogance. She recognized the type, finance or legal, full of performative charm and rehearsed entitlement. Their voices were loud, joking over each other, filling the space with brash laughter that didn't quite reach their eyes. She approached with her notepad. "Good morning, gentlemen. I'll be right with you." One of them, tall, slick-haired, maybe early 40s, didn't bother smiling. He glanced at his watch, then snapped his fingers. "Miss? We've been here 5 minutes." She looked at the clock. "Actually, just under 1, he shrugged. "Still too long," another chimed in. "You should be used to service, right?" The tone wasn't just impatient. It was laced with something colder, something familiar. Jasmine kept her expression neutral, jotted their orders quickly, and retreated to the counter. Her hands trembled as she poured their drinks. She'd dealt with this before, men like this, who wanted to remind her where she stood. As she returned with their iced teas, one muttered just loud enough for her to hear, "Figures. Always late, always with attitude." Jasmine froze for half a second, then smiled, placed the drinks down with precision, and walked away. Harold saw it all. His newspaper didn't move, but his eyes followed. His jaw tightened. His fingers curled ever so slightly over the edge of his mug. When she returned with their food, it got worse. The first man, the one with the watch, reached out as she leaned over to place a plate. His hand brushed her hip, casual, deliberate. "Oops," he murmured. Jasmine stiffened. Her stomach turned. She looked at him, expression blank, but her pulse thundered in her ears. Before she could respond, Harold Langston rose from his booth. The movement was slow, steady, but it carried weight, like something sacred had been disturbed. The diner quieted. Forks paused mid-air. Conversations froze. Even the kitchen fell silent. Harold walked toward table 9, his cane in one hand, his eyes locked on the man with the wandering fingers. "Is this how you treat women?" he asked, voice low and deliberate. "Or just the ones you think won't fight back?" The men laughed awkwardly. One smirked. "And who are you? Her grandfather?" Harold leaned in slightly. "No, just a man who's tired of watching cowards mistake cruelty for confidence." Jasmine was frozen. Her hands gripped the tray like it was a shield. "Mr. Langston," she said softly, trying to diffuse. "It's okay. I'm fine." Harold turned to her, eyes filled with something fierce, protective, angry and heartbroken. "No, Jasmine, it's not fine, and you shouldn't have to act like it is." The manager, Terry, rushed out from the back, his face plastered with false concern. "Gentlemen, let's all calm down. Jasmine, maybe take 5. The men scoffed. "We feel harassed," one said. "I want to speak to your supervisor." Harold's voice didn't rise, but it sliced through the tension like a scalpel. "You're lucky I'm not 20 years younger," he said. "Or the table would be on the floor, and you with it." Gasps. Murmurs. The men demanded their meal for free, claimed they were victims of aggression. Terry, ever spineless, nodded nervously. trying to appease everyone. Jasmine just stood there, stunned, exhausted. She apologized, because it was the only move she had left. After the men left, smug and smugger, Harold returned to his booth, but he didn't touch his toast, didn't drink his coffee. He left quietly, dropping a napkin on the table. No tip, no smile, just a square of folded paper. Later, when Jasmine finally got a break, she found it, written in neat script. "The world is broken, but you're not. Don't let them convince you otherwise." She sat in the supply closet with the napkin pressed against her chest. Tears slipped silently down her face, not from shame, but from release, from years of swallowing disrespect, from standing alone, from finally being seen. Harold didn't come back for 3 days after that. When he did, Jasmine greeted him the same way she always had. But this time she said something extra. "Thank you." He didn't respond right away, but he gave her a long look, like he was still deciding if the world could be fixed after all. Then one morning, Harold Langston didn't show up. No call, no message, no explanation, just an empty booth and a coffee pot that stayed full. Jasmine noticed immediately. She always did. At 7:45, she glanced toward the door, expecting the familiar shuffle of his shoes, the click of his cane, the quiet nod. But nothing. By 8 she'd poured a cup of coffee out of habit. By 8:30, she stopped pretending not to worry. At first, she tried to brush it off. Maybe he had a doctor's appointment. Maybe he was just running late. But there was a tightness in her chest, a quiet warning. Something was off. The second day, she hesitated before setting up his booth. But still, she folded his napkin just the way he liked. She told herself, "He'll walk in any second now." He didn't. The third day, she stood at the counter staring at the door longer than she should have. She messed up an order, dropped a tray, missed a cue from the cook. The world felt out of step. By the fourth morning, her smile was gone. She asked around casually, "Anyone here from Mr. Langston?" Blank stares, shrugs. "Who?" She realized how little anyone else noticed him. A man who sat in silence, who barely tipped. To them, he was forgettable, but not to her. She called local hospitals during her break, checked the newspaper, scrolled through obituary listings online. Nothing. No phone number, no emergency contact. No address, no digital footprint, just silence. And silence can be a cruel answer. That night, Jasmine dreamed of him. In the dream, he was at the booth like always, but when she brought him his coffee, he faded, like smoke in the morning sun. She reached out, calling his name, but her voice echoed in an empty diner. She woke up with tears on her cheeks. The absence began to bleed into everything. She moved slower, spoke less. Her manager noticed and asked if she was okay. "I'm fine," she lied. She wasn't. Each morning she made 2 cups of coffee, one for herself, one she placed in the break room across from her. It wasn't about superstition. It was ritual, a way to honor something she couldn't name. The other staff teased her gently. "You dating a ghost now?" She smiled faintly. "Something like that." What she didn't say was how much she missed the sound of Harold folding his paper, the way he nodded, just once, as if confirming something important only he understood, or how he once called her steady, and she'd held that word like armor. One afternoon, in a moment of quiet, she found herself sitting in his booth, just sitting, hands clasped, breathing slowly, and she remembered a moment, a small one from weeks before. She'd been rushing, flustered, dropped a pitcher of tea near his booth. It shattered. She had crouched down, embarrassed, trying to clean it up before anyone noticed. Harold had leaned forward, looking down at her. "You don't need to rush," he'd said. "The people who matter will wait." At the time, she'd laughed it off. Now those words echoed. What haunted Jasmine wasn't just his absence. It was the fact that she hadn't said goodbye, hadn't gotten the chance to thank him, or to ask him more about his daughter, or his regrets, or what he saw in her that made him care. It was unfinished, and that hurt more than if she'd known he was gone for good. This was different from losing her mother. That had come with hospital rooms and doctors and hospice. There was ceremony in that grief, a process. This? This was a door that closed without warning. No key. No explanation. Jasmine began to leave a sticky note at his booth every morning. Just one word each time. Hope. Still here. Thank you. She didn't know who she was writing them for. Him, herself, maybe the universe. But she hoped, deep down, that wherever Harold Langston was, he'd feel it, because you can't sit across from someone for 2 years and not leave a mark, and he had marked her, in quiet ways, in strong ones, and now, in his silence, she was learning what absence really meant. Not the absence of a customer, the absence of a man who had become a presence. A mirror, a steady breath in her daily storm. It happened exactly 10 days after Harold Langston stopped coming. A gray Thursday morning. Light drizzle tapped against the diner's windows. The sky hung low like it was waiting to drop bad news. Jasmine was mid-shift, refilling a regular's coffee when she noticed them. 3 sleek black SUVs pulling into the lot outside. She barely registered it at first. Maybe someone was lost. But then the doors opened. 4 men in tailored black suits stepped out. Sunglasses, earpieces, rigid posture. Bodyguards. No doubt about it. They moved with synchronized precision, scanning the lot like something out of a crime show. Then 2 more emerged. Lawyers, expensive gray suits, polished leather briefcases, the kind of people who'd never willingly set foot in a place like Cafe Aurora unless something serious was about to happen. The entire diner paused mid-breath. Terry, the manager, stepped out from behind the counter. The cook leaned around the pass-through. A kid dropped his waffle. The bell above the door jingled as the group stepped inside. The lead lawyer, a tall man with perfectly parted silver hair, looked around with surgical precision. Jasmine Moore? Her name, spoken so clearly in front of the entire diner, felt like a slap. Jasmine turned slowly, still holding the coffee pot. Yes? Her voice cracked despite her best effort. We need a moment of your time, he said, not unkindly but firmly. Terry stepped in, protective. What's going on? Is she in trouble? No, sir, the lawyer said. We represent the estate of Mr. Harold Langston. You could have heard a pin drop. Jasmine blinked. His estate? The lawyer nodded. He passed away peacefully 4 days ago. We were instructed to deliver something to you. Personally, Jasmine's knees wobbled. In private, if you don't mind, the lawyer added gently. Terry gestured to the tiny office in the back. Jasmine walked numbly, her breath shallow, the staff's eyes on her like she'd suddenly become someone else. The door closed behind them. The lawyer opened a leather folder, slid forward a thick envelope with her name on it in Harold's blocky, careful handwriting. He left a letter for you, and a number of other documents. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Jasmine, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. I wanted to tell you in person, but I ran out of time. Still, I need you to know, you're the most consistent, honest, grounded person I've met in decades, and I trust you more than I've trusted anyone in years. That's why I'm leaving Whitestone Holdings in your care. She froze. Whitestone Holdings? She whispered. The second lawyer, a younger woman with kind eyes, added, Mr. Langston was the founder and majority shareholder of the Whitestone Restaurant Group. 47 restaurants, several commercial properties, private investments. Jasmine's mouth opened and closed like a caught fish. Wait. You're saying he owned all this? The lead lawyer nodded. Including this diner. She stared blankly at the wall. You now hold majority control of the company and the trust he set aside for it. His family was not notified of this transfer in advance. He made sure everything was sealed and protected legally. Jasmine could barely speak. I'm not a CEO. I don't even own a car. The younger lawyer smiled softly. He knew that. He also left support systems in place. Advisors, documentation, people he trusted to help you if you choose to accept the responsibility. If I choose? She whispered. He gave you a choice, yes, but he made it very clear. You were his choice. The letter wasn't just business, it ended with this. People like you changed the world quietly. I made noise for years, but you brought peace with nothing but coffee and compassion. Whatever you decide to do next, do it with the same grace that carried you through every shift. I'll be watching. She didn't remember standing up, didn't remember opening the office door. But when she did, the entire diner turned to look at her. Jasmine walked out with the envelope clutched in her hand like it might disappear. She wasn't crying, not yet. But something in her face had changed. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was something else, something not even she could name yet. The envelope didn't just contain a letter. It held everything. Jasmine sat at her small kitchen table that night, her hands trembling as she unfolded the pages again and again. Around her were piles of legal documents, things she barely understood. Stock transfers, executive rights, property deeds, power of attorney clauses. It felt unreal, like she'd been dropped into a boardroom with no map, no title, and no armor. But the letter, that was her anchor. Harold's handwriting was careful, almost old-fashioned. The way he looped his R's reminded her of her mother's cursive grocery lists. There was no flourish, no poetry, just quiet reverence and brutal honesty. You gave me peace when I didn't know I needed it, he wrote. Not with words, with presence, with your refusal to break. I watched how you held the weight of the world with grace, how you gave dignity even when it wasn't returned. I've built companies, I've destroyed relationships. But you rebuilt something in me without even trying. She read it until the words blurred. She didn't sleep. Couldn't. Because her life was already changing, and she hadn't even said a word. But it wasn't the money that terrified her. It was what came with it. Within 48 hours of Harold's passing being made public, the Langston siblings emerged from their silence like sharks scenting blood. Camilla Langston arrived first. She wore power like perfume, tailored suits, sharp stilettos, and an expression that said, "You don't belong here. You must understand how ridiculous this is," Camilla said during their first meeting, her tone dripping condescension. A waitress controlling a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Jasmine stayed quiet. Trent Langston wasn't as polite. You think working a coffee pot makes you capable of this? We've run this business for years. Run into the ground, Nina Patel murmured from beside Jasmine. Camilla's eyes narrowed. This will never hold. We have lawyers. We have proof. But Harold had been methodical. Every line of the will had been reviewed by 3 separate firms. Every clause notarized, filed, and encrypted. He hadn't just left Jasmine power. He'd built her a fortress. Still, the Langstons didn't go quietly. They launched a smear campaign. Press articles accused Jasmine of seduction, of trickery, of manipulating a grieving old man. Social media spiraled into a frenzy. Photos of her in her waitress uniform were circulated with captions like, "From tips to takeover" and "Gold digger strikes again." But Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't need to speak, because Harold had spoken for her, before he died. Enter Nina Patel, CFO of Whitestone Holdings, an Ivy League graduate, overlooked, undervalued, but loyal beyond measure. She had served the Langstons silently, absorbing the insults, managing their chaos. But Harold had trusted her, deeply, and she had kept every email, every spreadsheet, every whisper of mismanagement. Together, Jasmine and Nina opened the vault. Harold had left behind a trail of fire. Audio recordings of Camilla mocking underpaid kitchen staff. Emails showing Trent diverting funds to shell companies in the Bahamas. HR complaints buried. Wages stolen. Promotions withheld based on race, gender, and age. Even security footage, silent but damning, of board meetings where Harold was silenced by his own children. He had documented everything. And now, it was Jasmine's. It took 3 weeks to compile, 3 more to prepare. And then came the board meeting. Jasmine walked into that glass tower in Midtown Atlanta wearing a plain black dress and worn-out heels. Nina walked beside her in a navy suit, face unreadable. Investors, executives, and regional directors filled the room. men and women who had dismissed Jasmine as a publicity stunt, a temporary problem. She stood at the head of the table, not shaking, not smiling, just steady. "My name is Jasmine Moore," she began. "Until 2 weeks ago, I poured coffee in one of your smallest locations. I scrubbed ketchup off booths and broke up fights in the parking lot. I made minimum wage. I also listened. I learned. I watched what worked and what didn't." She took a breath. "Today, I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to show you the truth." Then Nina clicked the laptop, slide after slide, voice clips, graphs, financial breakdowns, depositions. Jasmine narrated each one with the calm of someone who had lived it. They didn't just expose the corruption, they dismantled the illusion that power equals competence. By the end, the room was silent. Then came murmurs. Then came outrage. By unanimous vote, Camilla and Trent Langston were removed from all executive roles. Legal proceedings began immediately. Investors called for a new era, transparent, ethical, inclusive. And Jasmine, she stood tall and said this: "I never asked for this, but I won't run from it either. Harold Langston gave me more than an inheritance. He gave me a platform, and I'm going to use it the way he hoped I would. With grace, with fire, and with the same consistency I showed up to that diner with every morning." The room rose to its feet. Not out of politeness, but out of something far rarer in that space: respect. 6 months later, Whitestone Holdings didn't just survive, it thrived. Jasmine Moore, once a quiet waitress in a corner diner, now sat at the helm of a multi-million-dollar restaurant empire. But she hadn't traded humility for hierarchy. Her office in the Whitestone Tower downtown was filled with reminders of where she started. A black and white photo of Cafe Aurora hung beside a framed drawing from her son Elijah, a chipped ceramic mug from her first shift, and pinned neatly to her corkboard, the napkin Harold had left her with the words, "The world is broken, but you're not." She read it every morning before any meeting. Under her leadership, the company had transformed from a top-down corporate machine into something living, breathing, responsive, inclusive. She didn't fire people, she listened. She didn't command from the top floor. She toured kitchens, sat in break rooms, asked dishwashers what they'd fix first. Salaries were raised. Health benefits improved. Paid leave expanded. And for the first time in Whitestone's history, frontline workers had a direct vote in company policy. People across the country called it the Jasmine effect. But Jasmine never let it go to her head. "This was always Harold's dream," she told a news anchor. "He just needed someone who believed kindness could be strategy." She didn't become a CEO who hid behind glass walls. She became a mentor. She launched a leadership development program for women of color in the hospitality industry. She spoke at public schools. She partnered with food insecurity organizations to turn underperforming Whitestone restaurants into weekend soup kitchens. And at home, life got brighter. Elijah had his own room now, with space to build, paint, imagine. They traveled. They laughed more. He no longer asked if they were poor. Now he asked how he could help someone else. As for Camilla and Trent, they became silent shadows. Their lawsuits failed. Their reputations crumbled. And Jasmine never wasted a minute trying to gloat. That wasn't who she was. 6 months after the day the lawyers first walked into Cafe Aurora, Jasmine returned, not as a secret heiress, not as a public icon, but as a customer. She sat in Harold's old booth, ordered a black coffee, watched the morning light spill across the table. The waitress didn't recognize her, called her Hun, moved quickly. Jasmine smiled because power wasn't about being known. It was about knowing others, seeing them, choosing dignity, every time. When she stepped out of the diner, the air was warm, the sky wide open. And for the first time in her life, Jasmine Moore didn't feel like she was chasing something better. She was something better, and her story, forged in hardship, lifted by grace and sealed with truth, reminded the world of a simple, unshakable fact. Sometimes The people we overlook are the ones who change everything.